Hey there, welcome to Chasing Fi. Happy 2024. I know it's been a while, but I've been busy. Today, I am going to talk about why you should not be enticed by these ads that the state of Michigan is putting out to try to entice people to move there. Now, I was born and raised in Michigan. I lived there until 2010. And initially, when I left, my goal was to go to another state, work, make some money, and return to Michigan when things got better. The problem is that things never got good enough for me to think, oh, I can move back there and safely have a job and be successful. So I actually was considering moving to another state outside of Utah in 2015, well, really 2016. But then I met my husband, I got married, and so I'm still in Utah, which I'm glad that I did not move to Colorado. I thought about that. But the way that Colorado is now, I'm so glad I did not go there then. So because I'm from Michigan and I, obviously have a lot of friends on my social media that are from Michigan and family and information, I look at pages from Michigan, I am seeing these ads like they're bombarding my timeline with ads. And it's so funny because when I see them, I'm like, no, that's not real. The slogan for the ad is also equally annoying because it is "You can in Michigan." You can imagine the comments from people who moved away from Michigan because they absolutely could not build a decent life there. And that's not to say that there aren't great things about Michigan, but let's be real about what's great and what's not. So we're going to start with reasons why you can't in Michigan. So here we go. Reason number one, you can't in Michigan. Many of us who really loved Michigan, had family and friends in Michigan, wanted to stay, but we had to leave if we wanted to have a decent life. Many former Michiganders hoped that the economy would improve and we'd be able to move back, but that hasn't happened. For example, Michigan's economy was ranked 49th when I left the state in 2010. And in November 2023, it was ranked 46th. The industry seeing the most growth in Michigan is retail, which indicates that lower paying jobs are increasing while higher paying jobs are less prevalent. Anyone who is looking to uproot their life and move to a new place is going to do their research. At least I hope they will. That is why I live in Utah. When I decided that I was going to leave Michigan, I looked at states that had really good economies. That was the main goal. I needed a decent economy because Michigan's economy was so bad. I was working 3 part-time jobs at the time. I wanted to go somewhere where I could get 1 full-time job and maybe 1 part-time job if I wanted to have a little extra savings. And I did that, no problem, when I moved to Utah. In fact, initially the choices were Colorado, South Carolina, or Utah. I chose Utah because Utah had the best economy out of the 3 states. And at this point, Utah is still in the top 3 or 4 for economy. We're usually number 1. Sometimes we slip down to 2 or 3. But if I wanted a job in Utah right now, I could have it tomorrow. Trust me, when I moved to Utah, I had all types of job offers. There were opportunities, not all good ones, but there were opportunities, jobs for me to take. And that was something I had never experienced before because I had lived in Michigan all my life before that. And I was shocked. You mean to tell me I can put in applications, people call me back, and I get interviews for most of the jobs that I apply for? It was crazy. So one of the ads that Michigan is putting out says they have high-tech jobs and techno, for the record, which is really crazy because the picture they have here looks like a guy cooking meth at a rave, but, whatever. I don't know who's designing these, but it's kind of crazy. I'm thinking that somebody has gotten into Mid-Journey and kind of gone crazy. So the ad says high-tech, high-paying tech jobs is what it says. So I decided to check out Indeed.com and see if there were a lot of high-tech paying jobs. Well, there are some, but there aren't like a ton. Currently, Michigan has a little over 10 million people. A good chunk of the population is retired or reaching retirement age, but there are still plenty of people hunting for jobs in the state. And there are several universities pumping out talent every year. One has to ask the question, if there are so many jobs in Michigan, why do so many of the graduates of the University of Michigan, Michigan State University, Wayne State University, Central Michigan University, Western University, Eastern University, why do they go elsewhere to work? Well, the answer is simple. There are some high-paying jobs in Michigan. I'm not going to say that there aren't, but there aren't so many that you should be broadcasting that. I went on Indeed.com, and now, mind you, I know that's not, the be-all, end-all. Not all the jobs are going to be listed there. I saw 437 high-paying tech jobs in the state of Michigan. So that's great, but in a state with over 10 million people, I don't think that that's that great. I don't think it's hey, come here, we have so many jobs, because you don't. And the jobs that you do have open, the question is, how come all of those fresh-faced graduates and things like that, how come they leave Michigan instead of taking those jobs? So that's one reason. The second reason is these ads are super dishonest about what Michigan has to offer. So we just talked about the tech jobs. The other thing that they promote things like, like they have a picture of a guy playing golf and on a sunny beach and all this stuff. And you might be able to do that a little bit in Michigan, but let's be honest, Michigan's not a place that's known for sun. People aren't playing golf year round there, or, 6 months out of the year or anything like that. So why go with that? Instead, tell us what Michigan has to offer. Now, I will say, if you can live somewhere other than the Metro Detroit area, Michigan could be a pretty nice place. In fact, northern Michigan is absolutely gorgeous. So that's the best part of the state. And I mean, if you can live in the UP, oh man, it's like heaven. So why not advertise like Ohio and Indiana are? Say, hey, we're looking for some remote workers to move here because we don't have jobs and we know it, but bring your job with you. You get a lower cost of living and you get to enjoy this beautiful, pristine shoreline, something like that. So pay the remote workers like other states are. Say, hey, we'll pay you, I don't know, $15,000. You stay here for 5 years or something like that. Like a lot of states are doing that. But Michigan is not, from what I can see, offering any incentives for people to move there. There are a lot of reasons not to move to Michigan. And if you have to live in Metro Detroit, I just feel like you could live anywhere in the Midwest because honestly, the Midwest is the Midwest and all the big cities are pretty much the same. So, I mean, some are bigger than others, like Chicago's bigger, but you have the same problems. You get the same feel in these metro areas. So there's not really an incentive to move to Michigan. If you are going to move somewhere, Ohio and Indiana have cheaper places and some of them are nicer. So, and their economies are better than Michigan's as well. Not that much better. Well, actually, Indiana's doing a lot better than Ohio and Michigan, but even Ohio is doing better. Michigan, like I said, as of November 2023, they were 46th when it came to economic growth. Very slow growth. The third reason why people don't take these jobs and these jobs are available, like when it says high-paying tech jobs, the reason is because salaries are lower in Michigan. And this, my friends, is tied to why you can't in Michigan. If you move to a state where retail is the fastest growing sector, you can expect to make less money. According to Forbes, the average salary in Michigan is $58,000 a year. And that's in line with the other Rust Belt states. They run from like $56,000 to $63,000. And honestly, it's not terrible, right? But it's definitely not great. Also, if you are looking for higher salaries, everybody knows that you're going to the Northeast. That's where you're going to have the highest salaries. Now, also, you're going to have high cost of living too. But if you're looking for the higher salaries, it's not going to be the Midwest. In fact, you would go Northeast, West, then the Midwest, and then the South. So since Michigan's economy is growing slower than other states, and a good portion of the state's population is over 50, the future does not look very bright. The fastest growing demographic in Michigan is people over 85. In a way, this is really great because we hope it means people are living longer, healthier lives, but it also means that within the next few decades, the fastest growing demographic of the state will die off. It isn't attractive to companies that want to establish themselves in a place where young, talented workers are plentiful. The fewer jobs, the less need to increase salaries. And last but not least, repealing Michigan's right to work status was a big mistake. This lets everyone know that Michigan is once again owned by unions. As someone who graduated from college and couldn't find a job in part because of union politics, I'm not a fan of unions, and I know I'm not alone. Michigan is making all the wrong moves if they are interested in building a bright future. Over the past few decades, union membership has dropped amongst American workers, and there are reasons for that. One reason is when you are in the union, you're paying dues constantly to this union. Your union might be good, or they might do absolutely nothing, but you still have to pay the dues. Also, unions often are fighting for things that workers don't want. And while they're fighting for it, you don't have the right to go in and work. So, for example, in the most recent auto industry strike that happened, workers were making about $12 an hour. So while they were out on the picket line, that's all that they were making. It was very hard to survive on it, but they couldn't go back and cross the picket line because they were in the union. They had to wait until the union bosses said, we're satisfied with the deal. And the deal, some of the things that they were asking for were just not logical. They were never going to get some of this stuff. And then you might get it, but if that means that there will be layoffs and plant closures, did you really get anything? Now there will be people that don't have a job at all. So this was a big, big mistake. The other thing that Michigan has going on that a lot of people probably don't know is that they raised their minimum wage. Currently, it is $10.33, right? So this is $3 higher than the federal minimum wage, which is what my state uses. Now, I think the federal minimum wage does need to come up. I do believe that. But it's interesting that a state that has raised their minimum wage higher is struggling to attract workers and also is not doing well with economic growth. So while there can be a lot of debates about the minimum wage, the federal minimum wage, I know it needs to come up. But when you start raising it, there are companies that'll look at your state and say, I'm not going to be able to afford that. Like smaller businesses will struggle with this minimum wage as well. And one thing that happened last year is that a lot of these like little restaurants, because restaurants and cafes and bars and stuff like that, huge business in Michigan. Like I said, the retail sector. So a lot of them closed. They can't afford to pay this. How many closed? Well, so by the end of 2023, that year saw 50 restaurants, bakeries, bars, cafes close. And in the past few weeks, there have been a lot more that have closed. I see it in their news. Places are just shutting down. And I can't help but wonder if some of that is because they just can't afford the minimum wage that Michigan has set if they have some downtime. If there are not customers coming in, then they're going to have to shut their doors. So remember, retail is the fastest growing industry in Michigan. It's the top industry, okay? Michigan is a service-oriented state when it comes to work. And if this industry is not doing well, then what's happening with the other ones? The fourth reason you need to know that Michigan is not presenting itself in a realistic light in these ads that they're showing about, so much opportunity here and you can in Michigan is the governor. The fact that Michigan reelected a governor who basically shut down the state doesn't bode well with many people. Michigan has not had a great economy for several decades, but it was showing signs of life about 6 years ago. But when the state shut down for the pandemic, several people I know relocated to Florida or Texas. This is how extreme things were. A man who owns a barbershop in Owasso, 78 at the time, during the pandemic, things were all shut down. And he said, hey, I have to work. he had trouble getting his stimulus checks and unemployment and all that stuff, because I know I didn't have to apply for that because obviously I work from home, but I heard a lot of stories about, these systems weren't working and things like that. So this 78-year-old man, he had trouble with the system or something happened. He didn't get his stimulus checks and his unemployment. So he went to his shop and he opened the doors. People drove from around the state to get their hair cut because they wanted to support this small local business. And it was a wonderful story. But what was the response? Well, there was talk of filing criminal charges on this man, even though he was not forced to go to his shop, and none of the people that showed up were forced. No one was being forced. Everybody showed up voluntarily and they wanted to be there. Everyone was an adult too. There weren't any children. The youngest person was 19. So if that's the case, why would there be criminal charges? Because the governor said that he couldn't open. Everything's supposed to be shut down. So this really, it rubbed me the wrong way because I'm like, this is a man who he's going to be in dire straits within a few weeks. Like, I know when I was in Michigan, if I had to take a few weeks off from work, I was in trouble. At one point I had surgery and I was off work. And even though I had some disability insurance through my job, it only paid like 25% of what I was making. I wasn't making much. I ended up going back to work early. Like the doctor was like, no, you need to take at least 2 weeks off. No. I took a week and 2 days off and then I went back to work because if I had taken the full 2 weeks off, I was afraid that I was going to be homeless. So, and that was because I was making $11 an hour at that point. And then because the economy was so bad, I wasn't getting the 40 hours anymore because I was working in a restaurant. Like I said, that's a very popular job. Like lots of people work in restaurants. In fact, I have several friends who worked with me in that same restaurant and they are still there. And it's not because they haven't been looking for other jobs. It's just that those opportunities have not come along. And I think about that because I think if I had stayed in Michigan, my life would be stagnant like that as well. Even though I applied for jobs every day, it was like applying for jobs was like a second job for me. Okay, so the other thing that we need to think about here is the weird crimes that take place in Michigan. Listen, Michigan is a true crime podcaster or show's dream because you have all the violent crime in Detroit, Flint, all the other major cities. Like the big cities, that's where people get shot and things like that. A lot of it is connected to drugs. But in the smaller places, you have some weird, creepy crime too. I'm sure most people have heard of Kelly Cochran of Iron River, who the show Dead North was about. She murdered her boyfriend and probably barbecued him for the neighbors, parts of him. And she also killed her husband and probably a lot of other people. Then there was another man, a Shiawassee County man, who murdered a guy who was named Kevin Bacon, not the actor, but he ate parts of this guy. Like, it was really strange. Like, genital parts. Why? The two had met on Grindr, and I guess we're supposed to be meeting up for some type of, sexual something. But instead he kills him and he hangs his body up in the basement. And I'm just like, what happened here? Then there's another story from Burton, Michigan, where the police, they're called to do a wellness check. They show up, they go in the house, they find a bunch of garbage bags of human remains in the bathtub. Eventually, they track down the husband, who they think killed the wife, and they pull him over, and he shoots himself. And I know there's crime everywhere. Absolutely there is. But there's something about this combination of these weird crimes in these little places in Michigan that you wouldn't expect, along with all the big city crime in the various cities, Lansing, Flint, Detroit, all these places, that just makes you say, I don't want to be here. I don't want to be surrounded by this. Or at least that's how I felt about it. That was one of the things. That's one of the things that I'm so happy to be out of Michigan, because here in Utah, things happen. Weird things happen sometimes. But the frequency is much less. There's much less crime. There are also fewer people. I get it. But I'm just telling you, Michigan's got some weird stuff going on. I know it's not just me because my younger sister really wants to get out of there. She's lived in North Carolina and Texas and Connecticut. She moved around for her job. And now she's back in Michigan and she wants to leave. So she says there's just something about it. And I agree. There's just something about it. I don't even know what it is. The sixth reason why you need to be cautious when you're seeing these ads and all this that Michigan is putting out, say that it's just this great place to live. If you live in the Metro Detroit area, you need to be concerned with several weather events that happen on a regular basis. But it's not really just the weather. Like, for example, I love a good winter. We had like 1.5 feet of snow in the past, 2 weeks? It's been great. But one thing that I like about winter here that I didn't like about winter in Michigan is how the roads are taken care of. Here in Utah, if we have a snowstorm, you can expect that the roads are going to be cleared. Like, maybe not in the middle of the storm, but they're going to be cleared, okay? So I'm talking like you have a storm in the morning. By the time you go out in the afternoon, you can get on the highway. Roads are clear. It's not dangerous. When I lived in Michigan, we would get snow. And then a lot of times it would warm up and then we'd get rain and then would turn to ice. When that happened, the best thing that you could do is just stay home. Really, stay off the roads. And remember, Michigan doesn't have mass transit. So if you have a job that you have to go to or you need to run errands, you're going to be out in this weather. And when I lived in Ypsilanti, I worked in Novi. And the drive there, I would leave like 2.5 hours early because I knew that I could count on the roads in Oakland County to be clear. But Wayne and Washtenaw were really iffy. Wayne almost never cleared. So this is something that comes along with the weather that you got to consider. The other weather thing that you need to be on the lookout for is in the summer, you can expect lots of tornado warnings and watches. And most of the time, it's not going to come. In fact, I used to stand outside and watch the storms because I lived kind of down in a little valley and you could see the storm off in the distance. It never hit our town. But with that comes power outages. And I mean, I'm not talking about, hey, every few years you might get a power outage for like a night or something. I'm talking about power outages that last for days and happen in the middle of summer when the humidity is merciless. And, you know, this is something, in fact, I just had a friend, her power's out and it's winter. So it happens in the winter too. But during the summer, you can expect to have some power outages. I mean, it just seems to be, hey, just something that you expect every couple weeks. And I'm sure there are some people who they're not experiencing that. But most of the people I know in Michigan, if you talk to them about last summer, all of them could say, we had a power outage, at least 2, because I know there were some really big ones. And the storms are bad there. They can be really bad. And sometimes tornadoes hit. The other thing is Michigan has a lot of trees. And one thing, every time we go there, my husband freaks out because the power lines are so low. And he's like, why are they so low? Like, so if you have a lot of trees, you can expect those power lines to get hit. And they are really low. I'd never really noticed it, but our power lines are not like at the 7-foot height or something like that. They might be at 8 feet, something like that, but they're low and there are lots of trees. So you can expect a lot of power outages. If you move to the northern part of the state, you just have to know that there are going to be times where you just can't get around. You need to have a proper vehicle to drive through some pretty gnarly snow and ice and things like that. Just as long as you do that, you'd be fine there. I think most people who would move to the northern part probably would have remote jobs, so that might not be as much a concern for you. So these are just things to take into account if you are watching these ads that, I mean, I'm getting them probably 3 or 4 a day in my timeline on Facebook. So if you see them, just know they are not giving you the full picture. And if you are looking to move somewhere that has more opportunity or someplace that is willing to compensate you for moving there and bringing your remote job. There are lots of places like that, but I haven't seen many in Michigan. I think that there was in Jackson, Michigan. There was one. I don't know if that's still active, though. That was a couple of years ago. But anyway, I think that this could be a fun little series to do, like different places that could be good to move if you're looking for new opportunities. So I think I'm going to focus on that. So I'll see you in the next one.